Imagine being 5 months pregnant, your world falling apart as the man you love walks out, saying you're not attractive enough to be with him. Now picture standing under bright lights years later, wearing a crown as Miss Miami, with that same man watching from across a crowded bar, realizing he was wrong. I was 24 when I found out I was pregnant. It was a sunny afternoon in Miami, and I was sitting in my small apartment, staring at the positive test in my hand. My boyfriend Jake and I had been together for 2 years. We weren't exactly planning for a kid, but I thought we were solid. He was charming, always knew how to make me laugh, and we had a routine. Dinners at our favorite taco spot, late-night drives along the beach, talking about dreams that felt just within reach. I was excited to tell him, nervous but hopeful. I figured we'd figure it out together, like we always did. When I told Jake, his face changed. He didn't say much at first, just sat on the couch staring at the floor. I expected him to be shocked, maybe even a little scared, but I didn't expect what came next. A week later, he sat me down and said he couldn't do it. He said he wasn't ready for a kid, that it wasn't about the baby. It was about me. He told me I wasn't attractive enough for him anymore, that he didn't see a future with me. I was 5 months pregnant, and he was gone by the end of the month. No big fight, no dramatic exit, just a quiet disappearance. He left a note saying he needed space and moved out while I was at work. I spent the next few weeks in a fog. I'd go to my job at the coffee shop, smile at customers, and come home to cry in the shower. My body was changing. My belly was growing, my clothes didn't fit, and I felt like I was losing myself. Jake's words kept replaying in my head. Not attractive enough. It wasn't just about looks. It was like he'd taken a knife to my confidence. I stopped looking in mirrors. I'd walk past them and turn my head, afraid of what I'd see. My friends tried to help, bringing over food, checking in, but I felt alone. I was carrying this baby, and the one person I thought would be there had walked away. Money was tight. I was living in a one-bedroom apartment, and my barista job barely covered rent. I started picking up extra shifts. Even though my feet ached and my back screamed by the end of the day, I'd sit on my couch at night, scrolling through baby blogs, trying to figure out how I was going to afford diapers, a crib, all of it. I didn't tell my family much. They were back in Ohio, and I didn't want them worrying. I just kept going, one day at a time, because I had to. The baby was coming, whether I was ready or not. When my daughter, Lily, was born, everything shifted. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. 16 hours of labor, no one holding my hand except the nurses. But when they placed her in my arms, I felt something click. She was tiny, with these big eyes that looked right at me, like she already knew me. I promised her I'd be enough, that I'd give her everything I could. The first few months were a blur of sleepless nights and learning how to be a mom. I'd change diapers at 3 a.m., sing her lullabies I made up on the spot, and somehow keep going to work. I was exhausted, but I was determined. Lily deserved better than a mom who gave up. I started noticing changes in myself. I was stronger than I thought. I'd always been shy, the kind of person who stayed in the background, but being a single mom forced me to step up. I negotiated a raise at work, started budgeting like a pro, and even began taking night classes online to get a better job someday. I wasn't just surviving, I was building something for me and Lily. Still, Jake's words lingered. I avoided dating, didn't even think about it. I told myself I didn't have time, but deep down, I was scared of hearing those words again. About a year after Lily was born, I saw a flyer for a local fitness class at the community center. It was cheap, and they had childcare, so I signed up. I wasn't trying to be a supermodel. I just wanted to feel better. The classes were tough, lots of burpees and sweat, but I kept going. I started eating healthier, not because of some diet, but because I wanted to have energy for Lily. I noticed my body changing, getting stronger, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't hate what I saw in the mirror. I wasn't chasing Jake's approval or anyone else's. I was doing it for me. One day, a woman at the gym mentioned a local beauty pageant, Miss Miami. I laughed it off at first. Me? A pageant? I wasn't the type, too practical, too busy changing diapers, but she kept pushing, saying it wasn't just about looks, it was about confidence, community, and showing what you're made of. I thought about Lily, about the kind of mom I wanted her to see. I wanted her to know you could fall, get back up, and still shine. So I signed up, half expecting to embarrass myself. The pageant prep was intense. I had to learn how to walk in heels, practice answering questions on stage, and figure out how to afford a dress on my budget. I'd practice my answers while Lily napped, talking to myself in the mirror about my goals and what mattered to me. I didn't have a coach or a big team, just me, a borrowed dress, and a friend who helped with my makeup. The other women were nice, but I felt out of place at first. They seemed so polished, so sure of themselves. I was just a single mom trying to keep it together. The night of the pageant came, and I was terrified. Backstage, my hands were shaking as I adjusted my dress. I kept thinking about Jake, about how he'd made me feel small, but then I thought about Lily, sleeping at my friend's house, and how I wanted her to be proud of me. When my name was called, I walked out under the lights, and something shifted. I didn't feel like the girl Jake left. I felt like someone who'd been through hell and come out stronger. I answered my questions, smiled, and walked like I belonged there. When they called my name as the winner, I almost didn't believe it. Miss Miami, me. I didn't have time to process it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Interviews, photos, community events. I was still just me, still changing diapers and working shifts, but now I had this title. It felt good, not because of the crown, but because I'd proven something to myself. I wasn't defined by what Jake thought of me. I was someone who could show up, work hard, and win. A few months later, I was at a bar downtown with some friends, celebrating a rare night out. I was sipping a drink, laughing about something silly when I saw him. Jake. He was across the room, looking almost the same as he did years ago. My heart raced, but not like it used to. I wasn't the same person he'd left. He didn't notice me at first, but then our eyes met. He froze like he wasn't sure it was me. I could tell he was trying to figure out what to say, but I just smiled and turned back to my friends. I didn't need his words anymore. I'd already won. Seeing Jake at the bar hit me harder than I expected. I played it cool, turning back to my friends and laughing like nothing happened, but my mind was racing. He was standing there, same old leather jacket, same cocky tilt to his head. For a second, I was back in that apartment, hearing him say I wasn't good enough. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was Miss Miami, a single mom who'd built a life for my daughter, Lily. Still, his presence stirred something. Anger, maybe, or just the weight of everything I'd carried since he left. I stayed with my friends, sipping my drink, trying to focus on their stories. They were joking about some guy at the bar who kept striking out, and I forced a smile, but I could feel Jake's eyes on me. I didn't look back. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. After a while, he made his move. I saw him weaving through the crowd, heading my way. My stomach tightened, but I reminded myself I didn't owe him anything. Not an explanation, not a conversation, nothing. When he got close, he hesitated, like he wasn't sure how to start. I kept my face neutral, waiting. He said my name, and his voice sounded smaller than I remembered. He asked how I was doing, said I looked different. I just nodded, keeping my answers short. I wasn't about to spill my life story to him. He tried to make small talk, mentioning his job, some sales gig he was clearly exaggerating, and how he'd been figuring things out. I could tell he was fishing, maybe expecting me to ask about him, but I didn't bite. I mentioned I had a daughter now, just to see how he'd react. His face froze, and he mumbled something about how that was cool. Cool. That's all he had for the kid he walked away from. I changed the subject, saying I was busy with work and events. I didn't mention the pageant, but one of my friends, probably sensing the tension, dropped it casually, saying I'd won Miss Miami. Jake's eyes widened, and I saw him reassess me, like he was trying to square the woman in front of him with the one he'd left. He laughed, almost nervously, and said he always knew I had potential. I didn't react. His words felt hollow, like he was trying to rewrite history. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a break from his presence. In the restroom, I leaned against the sink, staring at myself in the mirror. I looked good. My dress fit well, my makeup was on point, but it wasn't about that. I was proud of who I'd become. I'd worked hard, not just on my body, but on my mind, my life. Jake didn't get credit for any of it. I took a deep breath and went back out, deciding I wasn't going to let him ruin my night. When I returned, he was still there, talking to my friends, trying to charm them. They were polite but guarded, and I appreciated that. I rejoined the group, keeping my distance from him. The rest of the night, Jake kept trying to stay close. He'd laugh a little too loud, offered to buy drinks like he was auditioning for a role in my life again. I stayed calm, deflecting his attempts to pull me into conversation. I talked about my plans, how I was saving for a better apartment, taking classes to become a marketing assistant, planning a trip to Disney with Lily. I could tell it threw him off. He expected me to be stuck, maybe broken, but I was moving forward. He didn't know how to handle that. Eventually, he brought up the past. Not directly, but in that sideways way people do when they're testing the waters. He said he'd made mistakes, that he was young and dumb back then. I didn't take the bait. I wasn't interested in his regrets. I'd spent too many nights crying over him, wondering what I did wrong, and I wasn't going back there. I told him I was happy now, that I'd figured things out. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Happiness was a work in progress, but I was getting there. As the night wound down, my friends started heading out. I was ready to go too, but Jake asked if we could talk just for a minute. I almost said no, but something in me wanted to hear what he had to say. Not because I needed closure, I'd already given that to myself, but because I wanted to see who he was now. We stepped outside, the Miami air warm and heavy. He started talking, saying he'd thought about me over the years, that he hadn't meant to hurt me. He said he'd seen me in the news after the pageant and couldn't believe how far I'd come. I listened, but I didn't feel much. His words were just noise. I realized I didn't need his apology or his approval. I'd spent so long carrying his judgment, letting it shape how I saw myself, but I'd outgrown it. I told him I was glad he was doing okay, but I had to get home to my daughter. I saw a flicker of something in his face. Guilt, maybe, or just surprise. But he didn't push. He said he'd like to keep in touch, maybe grab coffee sometime. I smiled, said I'd think about it, and walked away. I knew I wouldn't call. The drive home was quiet. I thought about Lily, asleep at my friend's place, and how she was my reason for everything. I thought about the pageant, the crown I'd never expected to win, and how it wasn't about the title, but about proving I could do hard things. Jake showing up felt like a test, like life was asking me if I'd really let go of the past. I had. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. He was a chapter I'd closed, and I had too much ahead of me to look back. When I got home, I checked on Lily, curled up in her crib, her little hand clutching a stuffed bunny. I stood there for a while, watching her breathe, feeling this quiet strength. I'd been through the worst: heartbreak, single motherhood, self-doubt, and I'd come out the other side. Winning Miss Miami was great, but the real win was my life now. I was building something for me and my daughter, and no one, not even Jake, could take that away. The next few weeks, I threw myself into my routine. Work, classes, gym, Lily. I started getting recognized more around town. People would stop me at the grocery store, say they'd seen me in the pageant. It was weird at first, but I got used to it. I started thinking about what I wanted next. The pageant had opened doors. Some local businesses reached out, asking me to do promotions, and I was invited to speak at a women's event. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I was open to it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like my life was mine to shape. Jake texted once, a few days after the bar, just a, "Hey, good seeing you" kind of thing. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need to. My focus was on Lily, on my goals, on the woman I was becoming. I'd spent too long letting his words define me, and I wasn't going back there. I had a daughter to raise, a life to build, and a crown to wear. Metaphorically, and maybe even literally if I decided to compete again, the future was wide open and I was ready for it. After that night at the bar, life kept moving fast. I was juggling my job at the coffee shop, online classes, and being a mom to Lily, who was now almost 2 and starting to talk in full sentences. She'd say things like, "Mama, go park," and I'd melt, even on days when I was running on 4 hours of sleep. Winning Miss Miami had changed things. Not just how people saw me, but how I saw myself. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was chasing something bigger. Jake showing up had been a blip, a reminder of where I'd been, but I was focused on where I was going. The pageant opened doors I hadn't expected. A local boutique offered me a part-time gig doing social media for them, posting about their clothes and styling tips. It wasn't a ton of money, but it was flexible and let me use what I was learning in my marketing classes. I started getting better at it, figuring out how to take good photos and write captions that got attention. People around town started recognizing me more, not just from the pageant, but from the boutique's posts. I'd be at the grocery store with Lily and someone would say, "Hey, you're that girl from Instagram." It was weird, but I liked it. It felt like I was building something. I kept up with the gym too. It wasn't about looking a certain way. It was about feeling strong. I'd push through a tough workout, sweat dripping, and feel like I could handle anything. Lily would sometimes come with me to the community center, playing in the childcare room while I lifted weights. The women there became my crew, moms, students, women like me who were just trying to keep it together. We'd cheer each other on, share tips about cheap meal prep, or how to get kids to sleep. They were the ones who pushed me to keep going, even when I doubted myself. One day, I got an email from the Miss Miami organizers. They wanted me to come back as a guest speaker for the next pageant. They said my story, single mom, working hard, winning against the odds, had inspired people. I was floored. Me inspiring people? I still felt like I was figuring it out, but I said yes. I spent weeks preparing, writing notes about what I wanted to say. I didn't want to sound like some motivational poster. I just wanted to be real. I thought about Lily, about how I wanted her to grow up knowing she could do anything, no matter what life threw at her. The night of the pageant, I stood backstage, watching the new contestants get ready. They were nervous, adjusting their dresses, practicing their smiles. I remembered that feeling, thinking I didn't belong, wondering if I was enough. When it was my turn to speak, I walked out and looked at the crowd. My hands were steady, my voice clear. I told them about being pregnant and abandoned, about hearing I wasn't good enough, about building a life for me and my daughter. I said confidence wasn't something you just had. It was something you earned, one hard day at a time. The room was quiet, and when I finished, they clapped loud. I felt like I'd done something that mattered. Afterward, a few women came up to me, saying my story hit home. One was a single mom, another had just gotten out of a bad relationship. They thanked me for being honest, for showing it was possible to come back stronger. I went home that night feeling full, not just proud, but connected. I wasn't alone in this. Other women were out there, fighting their own battles, and maybe my story could help them keep going. Work got busier, the boutique offered me more hours, and I started picking up freelance gigs, helping other small businesses with their social media. I was saving up, dreaming about moving to a bigger place with a backyard for Lily. I enrolled in another semester of classes, inching closer to my degree. It was exhausting, but every late night studying or early morning with Lily felt like a step towards something better. I wasn't just a mom or a pageant winner, I was becoming someone with a career, a purpose. Jake texted again a few months later. I'd almost forgotten about him, but there it was. A message saying he'd seen me at the pageant event online, that he was proud of me. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just nothing. He wasn't part of my story anymore. I didn't respond, just deleted the message and went back to playing with Lily. She was building a tower with her blocks, giggling when it fell. That was my world now. Her laugh, our life, the future I was making. I started thinking about competing again. Not Miss Miami, I'd already done that, but maybe something bigger, like Miss Florida. I wasn't sure if I'd win, but that wasn't the point. I wanted to push myself, to see how far I could go. I talked to my gym friends about it, and they were all in, offering to help with everything from childcare to picking out a dress. I started training harder, practicing my stage walk in my living room while Lily clapped like it was a show. I was nervous, but excited. I'd learned I could do hard things, and I wasn't afraid to try. One night, I was scrolling through my phone looking at old photos. There was one from when I was pregnant, sitting on my couch, looking tired and scared. I barely recognized that woman, not because of how I looked, but because of how far I'd come. I'd been left, told I wasn't enough, and I'd built a life anyway. I had a daughter who was my everything, a job I was good at, a community that had my back. Winning Miss Miami was great, but the real win was this, knowing I was enough, just as I was. I put my phone down and looked at Lily, asleep in her crib. I thought about the women I'd met, the ones who'd heard my story and felt less alone. I thought about the future, maybe a new pageant, maybe a promotion, maybe even dating again someday on my terms. I didn't know exactly what was next, but I knew I'd handle it. I'd been through too much not to. I turned off the light, feeling steady, ready for whatever came my way.